Essentially, my body was in fight, flight, or freeze 24 hours a day for 25 years. And so I had to become a master at nervous system regulation, even though my body was completely in an alarm state. The hole that's in everyone's bucket is that we're not good enough. They end up attaching the stories about the stuff that's happened to them as the reason why they feel that way, instead of recognizing that that just comes with the human curriculum. It shows up differently for all of us, but it's the same pattern, it's the same program. The thing that Viktor Frankl said kept him sane was his autonomy to choose. And he said the difference between the people that stayed alive, that weren't killed, they kept their spirit alive by exercising even the tiniest micro choices.
Welcome back to Return to Weird. I'm your host, Jessa, and in today's episode, I'm talking with Michael Boyle. Michael Boyle is a psychotherapist and coach who survived 24 years with a catastrophic, undiagnosed hole in his diaphragm. As patient zero, he built the coherence system to show people that while you cannot talk, think, or struggle your way out of your evolutionary biology, you can use it to your advantage. By fusing ancient wisdom, biological proof, and clinical acumen, Michael helps high performers uninstall their survival patterns and build the capacity for embodied aliveness and lives worth living. Hope this conversation supports you on your path to returning to weird. So, without further ado, let's dive right in. Thank you for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Sure. So, what does the word weird mean to you?
Well, that's a good question. Weird. I think weird is normal. So I'll make that little play on words to say that everyone's weird. And I hope that everyone embraces their weird, because one of the things that I think about in my work is the analogy of acorn turning into an oak tree. And when an acorn has the right conditions, it naturally will turn into an oak tree. And when it naturally turns into an oak tree, it by definition will be of the utmost benefit to itself, to others, and the whole world. And an oak tree drops enough acorns to populate an entire forest, and it doesn't need to try to. That's just what's in its nature. And the cool thing about human beings is that we're not just a bunch of different oak trees. We're all actually completely unique. And so if we all do the work to become an oak tree, we will naturally benefit ourselves, others in the world to the best possible degree. And so that means we have to be weird.
Mm-hmm. We have to be unique. Yeah, because we're all designed to contribute in a specific way that nobody else can.
Exactly. We need your acorns.
Mm-hmm.
And your acorns are not more or less valuable than my acorns. And that goes for everybody. So we're all special. And it's like kind of an entitlement or a narcissism to think I'm special, unless we recognize that everyone's special.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, I like that answer. So you've had quite a journey. You survived a 6-inch hole in your diaphragm.
Yeah.
For, I think it was like 24 years you lived with that.
Yeah.
And a TBI. For people meeting you for the first time, can you share a little bit about this? Like what was and how that became the foundation for your work?
Sure. Like a lot of us, I had a difficult experience as a youngster, particularly in college. I had a really severe mental health episode and had, I went from being kind of a popular athlete, varsity athlete, and, looking like I had all the things on paper, but I fell apart and went into a severe depression. And as a result of that, I had to leave school against my will. And that ended up being a really great thing. And I went into twice a day therapy with a wonderful man named Jed. And my sister challenged me to embrace a yoga practice, which I would have definitely never have thought that I would have done. And that really cracked open my heart. And I'm really skipping over some things there to say, because that is probably one of the most profound things that's ever happened to me. But fast forward to, because I missed school, I was off track with my friends that graduated a little bit ahead of me. So my parents sent me as a gift, kind of feeling bad for me. My friends were living in a ski town after graduation, and they sent me on a ski trip to go and visit them. And I skied off a cliff that I didn't really see, that I didn't know was there. And I went about 200 feet in the air, and I landed on my head and my shoulder, and my first rib broke in half and went through my lung. And so I collapsed my lung, and I was unconscious for 45 minutes, which is where the TBI happened. So being unconscious for more than 30 minutes is a grade 2 TBI, and you can have permanent brain damage from that. And so that, we thought maybe that was that. I knew that the TBI was there, and I knew that the collapsed lung was there. That was fixed initially, but we didn't know and maybe not the best investigation, but we didn't ultimately discover for another 24 years that at that point my diaphragm had ruptured. So the diaphragm is like a skin on a drum. When you hit something really hard, the skin can explode. So basically my diaphragm blew up, and
Oh.
and and when I now the things that I now know about breathing and the nervous system and the vagus nerve, and it's like for your diaphragm to be dysfunctional, um, actually pulls everything out of line in your whole system and really triggers your alarm system. Essentially, my body was in fight, flight, or freeze 24 hours a day for 25 years. And so I had to become a master at nervous system regulation, even though my body was completely in an alarm state. And we didn't know, no one, we didn't, it wasn't discovered yet. So I had a lot of times where people were saying, it's all in your head, and not in the kind way.
Yeah.
And, there was some really frustrating times there where I was, felt ashamed and felt bad about myself because I didn't know why I just kept feeling bad. And even though I was doing all the things. But eventually I learned how to create a really wonderful, thriving life. And I have 3 kids and have done some really great things that I'm proud about professionally. And so the thing I'm most proud about is that I didn't wait for the surgical fix, although I am extremely grateful. So 2 years ago, I had a surgery to fix this once we discovered it was there. But what I'm really proud about is that I didn't wait for the surgery. I learned how to find joy, even with a hole in my bucket, which is the name of the book. And I learned how to find that place of unconditional joy aside from the fact that my body was in such a difficult state. And so then it was only natural over time as I was learning those tools and practicing on myself and living what I teach to others that I would want to share it with other people, because it works actually a lot better and easier if you
Mhm.
don't have a huge hole in your diaphragm.
So you had a literal hole in your bucket, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So do you think this hole is universal? Does everybody have a hole in their bucket? Is that just part of being human?
I think so. So yeah, we're gonna jump into the spiritual philosophy stuff
And
because
then I want to circle back to like how you found joy before
yeah,
fixing
yeah,
that hole.
yeah, that'd be great. So I've studied a significant amount of Eastern spiritual work and philosophy, and done a significant amount of practice from various traditions. And the concept that I think is really relevant here is what is called is that we have a basic sense of misknowing, that we have uh, in Sanskrit, there's a term called the anavamala, and there's another term called the ahamkara. But basically what it means is that we develop a separate sense of self. And when we develop a separate sense of self, me plus everything else equals the totality. And so this is actually duality consciousness. So me plus everything else,
Mhm.
when in fact, the totality is actually the totality, regardless of me and everything else.
Mhm.
But we operate, our nervous system and our identity mechanisms operate as if we are a me separate from everything else. And if we're a me in the context of everything else, we're really small and we feel really vulnerable and we feel really scared. So we do 3 things: we fight for control, we are fear, and we have a perpetual sense of lack. And so I think that the hole that's in everyone's bucket is that we have a perpetual sense that we're not enough, that we're not good enough, that we're not whole, that we're broken, that we're damaged goods.
Mhm.
And I think what ends up happening that really is confusing for people is they end up attaching the stories about the stuff that's happened to them as the reason why they feel that way, instead of recognizing that that just comes with the human curriculum. It shows up differently for all of us, but it's the same pattern, it's the same program. And if we can get at the fundamental pattern and program, that's where our freedom is, not in fixing all the particular problems that are after the fact of that initial separate sense of self misknowing. Does that make sense?
Makes so much sense. Yeah. And, you know, the systems that we live in and the ways that we're indoctrinated don't point us to the truth of who we all are at our core, right? So it kind of creates this perpetuation too that makes it really hard to
Sure.
see that there's like another way of experiencing
Sure.
life.
Yeah, and the system itself, if we,
Mm.
something my
Mhm.
mentor calls the cultural trance. There are bad actors. I think that there are bad actors, genuine bad actors, but I think more often than not, it's ignorance just perpetuating itself. The people that have indoctrinated us into the frames of consciousness that result in suffering are themselves indoctrinated.
Mhm.
So it's just kind of a natural, it's almost like it's like a virus. It actually works quite a bit like a meme. And it spreads through the culture, and it spreads through our conditioning, but usually it's spread through people that mean well and love us, actually. And
Mhm.
of course, there are instances where there's more overt abuse and wrongdoing, and I'm never going to minimize that. I've done a significant amount of work with people, that have experienced childhood sexual abuse and rape and things like that. And so there's absolutely wrongdoing, and there's also this general. I think one of the things that was really wild for me to figure out is like I had this sense, and a lot of people have related to this. Is I used to think, man, did something really awful happen to me when I was little that I don't remember? And I think and maybe that's the case, and suppressed memory is kind of a possibility, but there's actually more research and evidence against it than for it. But I'm not saying it's not a possibility.
Yeah, I
Uh,
get
but
clients say this all the time.
yeah, but
Yeah.
so people don't realize that things can actually spiral out of control just by the basic mechanism that I explained earlier, without there having to have ever been an overt, specific trauma or wrongdoing.
Mhm. I'm wondering what you think about this in the context of ancestral trauma or maybe inherited
Yeah.
memory.
Yeah, right. That's part of the curriculum. That's part of the package that we get at birth. We all receive,
Mhm.
if I'm gonna speak good about it colloquially, we all receive blessings and curses. And it seems to be relatively true that some people get a more difficult hand than others.
Mhm.
And I always am trying. People will often say, wow, your journey's been so hard. And I am firmly aware that many people have had it harder and many people have had it easier. And
Mhm.
actually, comparison is one of the things that separate sense of self, that ego sense of self does, that keeps us separate. And we can draw inspiration from others. But if we're looking to say, oh, my path is harder or my path is easier, or that we're really just laying trips on ourselves and manipulating ourselves and shaming ourselves. Our path is exactly what it is. And we can have empathy and compassion for those that seem to have a harder path than we do. And
Mhm.
I also want everyone to know that no matter how hard the path is, you're empowered and you have the possibility to become free, and you have the possibility to become joyful anyway. And that's not to minimize the wrongdoing or the bad stuff or the injustice. In
Mhm.
fact, it's quite the opposite, but path is available to all of us.
Mhm.
And I think that that's really important no matter how seemingly hard or easy it's been.
Yeah. And there's a gift in the shadow too, right? You
Sure.
wouldn't be who you are and where you are if you didn't have that.
And that's true. And there's some ironies there. I think that in the new age world that maybe we talked about before we got on, like sometimes there is a condescending and a shaming and almost like a blaming people or for their own trauma and misfortune. And that's really shitty. I'm sorry. Am I allowed to swear here?
Yeah. Yeah, you're allowed. Yeah.
Sorry about that. I
No,
have
don't no, you can
I don't
curse.
have
I curse.
I don't have the cleanest mouth.
Neither
So
do I.
okay, cool.
Yeah.
So, but I'm not like I really I don't stand for that. People don't manifest their cancer or their rape or
Mm.
whatever. That's just really, frankly, deserves a punch in the face more than anything else. But so yes, there are blessings in all of the difficulties that I've been through because I've chosen that.
Mhm.
But that doesn't mean I would ask for it again. It
Mhm.
doesn't mean I wanted it to happen. It doesn't mean I wouldn't prevent it from happening again if I could. It doesn't
Mhm.
mean I wouldn't protect others from it happening to them. It doesn't mean I wouldn't advocate for punishing people that have done wrong or things like that, for not punishing people that have done wrong. So yes, absolutely. It is my personal choice. It is my empowered choice to choose to see the blessing side of it. But that can sometimes get used in the new world,
Yeah.
in the new age world as a way of shaming people.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that
Mhm.
happens a lot. And the reality is these are the cards that have been dealt for
Yeah.
whatever reason. So it's like, what are we going to do with them?
Yeah. I really like
Right.
one of the statements from I study in clinical studies from dialectical behavioral therapy. And it basically says it's not my fault. but it
Mhm.
is my responsibility.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's kind of the balance of kindness and empowerment together in
Mhm.
one statement. It's not my fault. A lot of it's not my fault, and maybe none of it's my fault. And fault maybe isn't even a concept that actually has any value. But it is my responsibility. If I want my life to get better, I'm the only one. It doesn't mean I need to do it alone. It doesn't mean that I can't have support and resources. In fact, I think all human beings are we are communal human beings and we heal together. But it is my responsibility to engage that process. And it won't happen for me. It'll happen with me though if I'm willing to engage it.
Yeah. So circling back, how
Yeah.
did you find joy? And I'm curious because I think you talked about it in the book is a skill that you're building, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's
So
a
can you
muscle.
say more?
It's a muscle, it's a choice and it's a choice at least in my personal spiritual practice, which I wouldn't necessarily project onto someone else unless they were asking for that same practice. And try to make these distinctions when I'm the difference, I wear different hats when I'm a coach or when I'm a therapist so it's always appropriate and kind to work with people where they're at and where they want to be and let them set the pace. But in my personal practice, the practice of unconditional joy is a choice. And it's not what I call icing on a shit cake. It's not smearing life with positive thinking. It's a choice to radiate the values that I choose aside from the conditions. And so I've learned from my mentor a state cognitive set of statements that are kind of the frame of the practice. And it says, even if this, I choose this. Aside from this, I choose this. Especially because of this, I choose this. So even though I had a hole in my diaphragm, aside from the fact that I had a hole in my diaphragm, especially because I had a hole in my diaphragm, I choose to be joyful. And it's not, when I say joyful, I don't mean happy, happy, I don't mean like, put on a birthday party hat and, that's not always the case. But I mean that I choose to be in love with life and I choose to embrace life. And by the way, I also don't always do this. There's been plenty of times where I feel sorry for myself and lick my wounds and
Mhm.
rise to the challenge of the practice that I have accepted for myself in this life. But with
Mhm.
consistency and dedication and practice and many other tools that support this choice to be joyful anyway, breath work and nutrition and exercise and meditation and visualization and, you know, the way I sleep and the way, all the whole nine yards, the way I can line myself up with circadian rhythms or spend time in nature. There's just so many things that I can do to support this choice.
Mhm.
And that's why it's not icing on a shit cake because it's real neurochemical change. It's
Mm.
real embodied change. It's real grounded practical change.
Yeah, I was gonna say it feels like you're getting at like embodiment.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering if there's another word or maybe not another word, but how you would define joy, if not like because people think joy is like,
Well, so joy is just a version that I have chosen to focus on for my particular path because
gotcha.
it's a little bit of my kind of I'm a relatively competitive person. I've gotten better with that. Actually, when I was a kid, I was unhealthily competitive. But I'm a competitive person. I've been an athlete most of my life, and I embrace that part of myself, and I have somewhat of a warrior spirit, and so it's a little bit of like I was born prior to ski crash, I had a tendency to be depressed, even though I had relatively good upbringing, and for whatever reason, depression was a part of my package that I was born with. And so for me, it's a little bit of an FU to say, okay, well, I'm going to go for unconditional joy. I'm going to go from being a person that, was born with an Eeyore personality to being, to being Tigger. And I haven't made that full transition yet, but I'm working on it. But in the spiritual work tradition that I've been trained in, we have, I talk about this in the book, we have the entire Jolka GPS compass. So that is joy, openness, love, kindness, awareness. That's Jolka, GPS, gratitude, presence, and surrender. So the entire Jolka GPS, one of those facets those are all the facets of one's true unconditioned nature. Beyond that sense of me and everything else,
Mhm.
We are more in touch with that oneness. One of the Jolka GPS virtues can always be at play, can always be relevant. So it's not necessarily the appropriate response to be joyful if, someone that you love just dies, but you can still be open, loving, kind. You can be grateful for their presence and their influence in your life. Right? So one of the Jolka GPS virtues and values is always appropriate. And I have just chosen, because of my particular past and struggles with depression, to focus on joy.
So how does this tie into, and I forget the words that you used. I think it was like the creative I am
Creative I am, yeah.
and the personality that's shaped by survival. What did
Yeah,
you
the
refer to
reactive I
that as?
was. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm just curious how you see using this
yeah,
like GPS system to
yeah,
kind of, yeah,
yeah,
to get there.
yeah. So most people, myself included, have a personality sense of themselves that is a reaction to everything that's ever happened to them. So we have a memory and we have a story bank, and essentially we collate through the file of our zillions of memories, and we create a meme of who we think we are. And that's our reactive identity. And that is as it says in the term, it is a reaction to everything that has happened to us. And when that reactive identity is in the driver's seat of the way we think, feel, and act, because we say, I am anxious or I am depressed, I am identifying, that is my reactive identity, identifying with the story that I was born with a tendency towards depression. So identity is the driver for the mechanism that filters our reality. So we have beliefs, and beliefs generate our perceptions, and our perceptions filter our experience and create our experience. So we don't actually make contact with the totality as it is. We don't experience reality directly in most cases, at least I don't. We don't experience reality directly. We experience our perception of reality, and our perception of reality is filtered. And the filter is our identity, who we think we are. And so when we have a reactive identity, we are filtering our experience of reality through the lens of the past. And because that system is dominated by the survival mode and our evolutionary priority to survive above all else, it has a built-in negativity bias. So it's designed to be fear-based and prioritize protection.
Mm.
So the reactive identity, it will always err to the side of negativity, fear, and protection, self-preservation at all costs. The creative I am, as a contrast, is a chosen creative replacement personality
Right.
structure that is based on our values and choices. It says, aside from whatever's happened, aside from my conditioning, aside from my ancestral trauma, aside from karma, aside from my astrology chart, aside from the shadow, aside from the government, aside from commercials, aside from what I learned at school, aside from my parents, aside from my childhood, I value and choose to be joyful or loving or kind. And so what I walk people through in the book and more in depth in my coaching series is that we generate a personality structure that is based on our values and choices. And we use that to become the new filter for our experience. And it takes repetition, it takes practice, but we can wire that in so that becomes our new default. And now we have a driver of the way we think, feel, and act. We have a filter of the way we think, feel, and act that we actually end up seeing more, experiencing more of that reality. And a simple little exercise that I do with people that we could do right now and listeners could do is that you just look around the room. You just look around, and then I'll say blue or yellow. And now you start noticing blue and yellow that you weren't noticing 5 seconds ago. The blue and yellow was already there. So I just primed your nervous system to notice blue and yellow. So we're always primed. We're always being primed. But what this perspective that I'm sharing is that we have the empowerment to prime ourselves, and we can prime ourselves according to what we value and choose. And then we'll start seeing evidence we'll start seeing proof of what we're priming ourselves to notice more of. And there's enough evidence in the universe to prove anything. So we can prove how awful it is, or we can prove how beautiful it is. And so I just want to be in charge of what I'm proving.
Yeah. And that's what you're saying is the reticular activating system, right?
Mhm.
It's that filtering process that
Yep.
we begin to notice what it is that we're giving our attention, focus, and energy on, which is like our most valuable resources,
Yes.
creates the experience of reality that we have.
Yes.
But
Yes.
yeah,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. So what I was thinking from what you were sharing, because I've been thinking about this a lot, the difference between survival consciousness and creative consciousness. It sounds like that's kind of like what
Yeah.
you're talking about, right? This
Absolutely.
personality shaped by survival and then there's the creative I am. And it's just interesting how we really can't go into creative consciousness when we are dysregulated or stuck
Yeah.
in survival mode. And so maybe, obviously we come in and out of that, but some people that are living under like chronic stress
Yeah.
don't even know that this creative consciousness and whatever that experience feels like for
Yeah.
whatever that's even possible.
And the key is, I mean, really it all comes down to awareness, because if we don't notice, we can't choose. And so,
Uh,
yeah.
You spoke about this. This is really good because it's the gap, right?
Yes.
Between, yeah.
Yes.
Do you want to say more about that?
Yes, the reactive state that most people are in until they do something differently is actually, it's just stimulus response. Most people are reacting to life and even thinking that they're choosing, but they're reacting. And in order to choose, in order to be creative, we need to stop. We need to pause. If anyone's listening is into even traditional teachings of the Buddha, this is noble truth number 3, Nirodha. You need to pause and cease the reactivity. But even doing that is creative. So when we're in reactive state, we're actually acting out a program. We're more like an autopilot. And once we notice, oh my gosh, autopilot is running my life, that noticing is the first creative step. And once I notice the autopilot is driving, and it's driving based on an autopilot can only do what it's been programmed to do. It is not conscious. It's not sentient. It can't make a free choice. It can only act out its program. So most people are acting out the patterns and programs of their entire existence and maybe their ancestors' existence. And we have to go, oh my gosh, the autopilot is driving. I need to take over the reins. And so in order to do that, we must pause and we must choose to do something differently. So even if we have a dysregulated nervous system, noticing that we have a dysregulated nervous system and choosing to do something to regulate it is creative. And so we can't wait to feel good, so to speak, in order to be creative,
Mm-hmm.
in order to have this creative consciousness experience that you and I are talking about. If we're waiting, we're going to be waiting forever. We need to choose it.
Mm-hmm.
And aside from the conditions, even if they're hard, aside from they're hard, especially because they're hard,
Mm-hmm.
because that suffering is actually sucky enough. So this is actually merciful. Now, a lot of people that are really entrenched in their sense of themselves as a victim, or feeling sorry for themselves, or feeling like their situation is so hard and unfair and unjust, and maybe it is, but when they really are firmly under the weight of that, they will often actually be offended at the suggestion that they have
Yeah.
an ability to choose something different. And it often might take them quite a bit of time and effort of making that choice before they actually experience the return on their investment.
Mm.
And that's real. There is sometimes a significant lag time in there. And so it does take significant persistence. I mean, in that the 25 years that we're talking about where I had this stuff going on, and even before that with depression, and man, there's some dark moments. Why isn't
Mm-hmm.
this working? What's wrong with me? I used to cry, literally. I mean, I remember more than a dozen occasions of bawling in my bed with my wife and just being like, why? My client, people at that point, I was already a professional. I was already an expert. And I'm like, my clients get better in 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. They do 1/10 of the things that I do, and they already feel great. And I still feel like shit. And I would
Mm.
cry and feel sorry for myself and get angry and want to swear at God. And so I know that it can be hard. And I don't want to minimize that for anyone. And I also know that perseverance is one of our greatest attributes as human beings.
What is your perspective on awareness? And because awareness to me seems like a precursor for choice, right? Like you said, but it also seems like, and I've seen this within myself and a lot of my clients and just people in general, that they know what they need to do, right? But they just can't seem to choose it. So it's like they have the awareness, they've come into that, but they can't seem
Yeah.
to interrupt the program enough to
Yeah.
choose differently.
Yeah. So I it's it's ironic because in my professional world and one of the challenges actually of people people that kind of end up coming into my professional world is I sometimes actually have too much stuff to share. And so people feel like a little bit overwhelmed, like there's a lot of content or there's a lot of tools or there's a lot of theory and I've learned to be better about metering that for people, but it's whatever. It's 25 years of my life and I'm super passionate about it. So I get really excited and then I go, blah, 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 and I'm really fired up about it. And I want to share and I'm like, I want to help people right away. And I want them to get, good results right away. So I get really excited. But sometimes it's too much and they're like, it's like drinking from a fire hose. It's like, so contemplating this over years of experience, I stumbled upon something that I call the grace and ease question. And it is the most kind and sustainable approach that maybe there's others that are similar, but it's as kind as and sustainable as it can possibly be. And so, I used to work with people that were like severely, severely depressed. And I would say to them, okay, well, first, instead of trying to do something that you don't want to do what you're already doing. Just choose to do what you're already doing. Like, I say, do you brush your teeth? Yeah, I brush my teeth. Okay, then before you brush your teeth, say, I intend to brush my teeth. I'm brushing my teeth. I brushed my teeth. And close that loop as a success. It'll build a little dopamine and then you'll be able to do a little bit more. So that little hack led me to actually this question, which is because questions are amazing. When you ask a question, first of all, you automatically have to be conscious and in a choosing state to ask a question. And when you ask a question, it's going to elicit the answer. It's going to if you ask a good question, it's going to elicit a good answer. If you ask a bad question, it's going to elicit a bad answer. And what I mean bad, good and bad, I don't mean morality. I mean useful, not useful. So when I ask a useful question, it's going to yield a useful answer. So when I ask the grace and ease question, it is what is the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? And when we break the grace and ease question down, next means it's here, it's available. Easy means it's literally easy. Willing means I don't have to should myself, shame myself, whip myself. I'm totally willing to do it. So I don't need to, because what people do is when they do what they think they should do, they must do, they ought to do, they whip themselves into shape, they fire themselves out, then they rebel against it within a couple days or a couple weeks. They will self-sabotage because they are actually, because of their own integrity, they're rebelling against their own kind of being their own petty tyrant. But when they do only what they're willing to do, and it doesn't matter how small it is. And this idea, I think, was largely inspired by reading a book by a guy named BJ Fogg, who wrote a book called Tiny Habits. And it's also become popular. I think this concept has become popular in Atomic Habits, but I've never read that book, even though it's
Yeah.
super popular. But basically, he said, BJ Fogg says, if you do want to have if you want to have if you want to do 20 push-ups a day, even if you can do 20 push-ups a day, don't do it. Start by doing one and then do one and then do one and then do one. And then when you can't wait, when you are dying, when you are so excited, you can't stand doing one, you just have to do two, you do two. And then you do two, and then you do two, and then you do two. And then until you can't wait to do three, and then you do three, and then you do three, and then you do three. And you build it like that. By the time you get to 20, you'll never stop. It'll be wired in because he says that not only do you have the muscular habit, but you have the neurological infrastructure to hold that habit in place. So when you follow the grace and ease question, you're actually being extremely kind to yourself. And so you just say, well, what's the next easy? So if I feel terrible, I feel anxious, I'm having a panic attack, I'm depressed, the whole 9 yards, I have trauma story and all of it. What's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? Nothing. Listen to this. Okay. Then choose to do nothing. Choosing to do nothing is different than reactively doing nothing. When I choose to do nothing and I ask the question again, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? I'm willing to take a big deep breath in. I'm willing to sigh. And now I'm asking the question inside. I'm willing to yawn and stretch, articulate. I'm willing to now I'm willing to get up.
Hmm.
Now I'm willing to go to the bathroom and brush my teeth. Now I'm willing to wash my face. Now I'm willing to take a shower. Now I'm willing, and it's always built on willingness and a success. There's no shoulding, there's no shaming, there's no punishing, there's no whipping. It's all kind and sustainable. There's nothing to rebel against, and it builds organic momentum.
Hmm.
And that is the most elegant and kind and easy way for people to get unstuck that I've discovered.
Yeah. And it seems like what you're sharing too about the pause and then the breath is that the gap, or the gap is the pause. I think to really simplify this too, it's like sometimes it's just like take a breath. Like literally
Yeah.
just take 3 deep breaths when you notice you're in the reactive patterning. And then even if you choose the same thing,
Yeah.
at least you're doing it with a little bit more awareness and
Totally.
a little bit more space.
Yeah. And you can also build the noticing muscle. This is why, as much as as people resist it, and it doesn't need to be as complicated as it's made out to be. Most people think it's something that they can't do. But all of the world's traditions that have worked at helping people feel better all have a meditation in them. And if everything of value comes after a pause, meaning you can't do a deliberate, dedicated action, you can't choose unless you first notice, then it behooves us to strengthen the noticing muscle. And so, some form of meditation practice is
Hmm.
literally essential for a life well lived and well loved, in order, because then you're actually able to notice more. When we are just caught up in the merry-go-round of suffering that is our reactive consciousness, we oftentimes, it's like that experience where, we've all been on a drive where we're driving through a curvy road and we're like, oh my gosh, like, I haven't made a conscious turn in an hour. I haven't been here in an hour. My autopilot has been driving the whole time.
Hmm.
I'm so lucky I'm alive. One, but two, it's like we have this ability to basically live our entire life on autopilot.
Hmm.
And until we literally, not just in the car, but we literally wake up and realize, like, I am the self. I have agency.
Hmm.
I have choice. I have freedom. And if I can do even something just a little bit different, it sends me on an entire different trajectory. And,
Yeah.
if I look at, if I'm heading in this direction, it's like a train track, it's going to get to its destination. But if I do even something a little bit different, by the time I get down the road, I'm in a way better place. I'm in a way better place.
That's so funny you said this because in the episode that I just posted, I said
Uh,
that when you're like sailing a boat and you just make the tiniest like 1%
yeah.
shift, you end
Yeah.
up somewhere completely different.
Completely different. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think people can really take heart in that, focus on those, what's the next easiest thing that I'm willing to do? And it makes a bigger difference than you think. And you just keep doing it.
Hmm.
You don't, people really get bogged down and, oh, well, I need to figure out all 100 steps.
Hmm.
No, you only need to take the next best step.
Yeah. And do you also see meditation as, you can meditate with your eyes open and just noticing, right? Because some people feel like I know a lot of people that struggle with meditation because they just if they sit still and they close their eyes, their mind is so loud they don't know what to do with
Yeah.
that. And so then they'll naturally just go into a reaction and like walk away from the meditation
Yeah.
or get lost in a thought spiral. And
Yeah.
so what I've found is, you can meditate while you're doing the dishes. It's just about being completely aware with what is unfolding right now and not trying to engage with it, cling to it, or you're just observing it. And so
Yeah.
you can even do this like a mindful walk.
Yeah.
So do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And I think it's important to cultivate formal time when you're dedicating to practice and the integration practice that you're talking about
Mm.
right now. I think they both have different types of value, but I also would assign the same grace and ease question to a meditation practice. Most people think they need to meditate for 10 minutes or 20 minutes or 30 minutes. And, this is something that my mentor jokes about. He said, well, if you sit down to meditate, for what you practice on, you become. And if you sit down to practice meditation for 30 minutes and you're distracted for 29 and a half minutes, what you've really practiced is distraction.
Mm.
and you'd be better off just doing the 30 seconds. And so, what's the next easiest amount of time that I'm willing to meditate? So, I would suggest to people if they wanted to really build a meditation practice, is to meditate for 10 seconds. And when that feels really good, meditate for 20 seconds. And literally, I mean, literally put on a timer, make it easy. And when 20 seconds feels really great and you're like, oh my gosh, this is good. I want to do 30 seconds, do 30. And then you want to do a minute, do a minute. You want to do 3 minutes, do 3 minutes and build it. This is the same. So someone gave me this unbelievably awesome advice when I was living in Huatulco, Oaxaca. And I was talking to this guy at a dinner party, and he told me that he was a long distance runner. And I mean like uber long distance, like ultra marathons, like running 100 miles at a time. And
That's
there
crazy.
yeah, there was a part of me that literally said that. I was like, I was actually kind of judgmental. I was like, are you not okay? What's wrong with you?" And I acknowledged that I was internally judging him, but I kept open and I was curious and I asked some more questions. I was like, "Okay, so I've never really liked to run. But I see the value in it as a good cardiovascular exercise. So what would you say to me? What would you say to a beginner runner if I were to start running?" And he blew me out of the water because he said, "Okay, well, I'll give you the same advice that I followed myself, which is never run a single step that isn't joyful." He said, "Go out and set a designated amount of time. Start whatever you want, 15 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, and start walking. Just start walking. And then just say to yourself, if it will feel good to run, run. And the second it feels bad, the second you think you should go faster or go harder, or you should push through the pain, or the second you think you should run, stop and walk. And then wait until you feel like you actually want to run again because it'll be fun.
Mhm.
And if it's never, just go for a walk the whole time. If it never feels like it will be fun, but if it feels like it'll be fun, run. If it feels like it'll be joyful, run." And he said, and so that's what I did. And it just ended up being like, I genuinely wanted to run more and then more and then more and then more. And he said, I'm in a state of total bliss and ecstasy when I run 100 miles. It doesn't feel grueling. It doesn't feel like I'm punishing myself. It feels amazing. I love it. It's absolutely a joy. And my body doesn't take a long time to recover because I built that so sustainably. So essentially, he was also following the grace and ease question. So I would say the same thing with, anything, any meditation practice or whatever. So just do what feels really good. And if it only feels good for 5 seconds, stop.
What's interesting about this, and I'm curious what you have to say about this, is what about discomfort, right?
Yeah.
Because how does that, yeah, how do you reconcile that, or yeah, how do
Well,
you bridge that?
discomfort is going to be with us for discomfort is a fact of life. Pain is a fact of life. And we've all heard the adage, pain is inevitable, but suffering is optional. But we haven't necessarily been taught the how to on the suffering part, on how to not suffer. In pain, the equation that I like to think about is pain times resistance equals suffering. And resistance is the multiplier. And so, we don't have a choice as to whether or not we're going to be with pain, but whether or not we're going to be with pain and discomfort. We can choose whether or not we suffer, or that's our choice.
Mhm.
So, whether, choose which pain you want. You want the pain of meditating, or do you want the pain of not meditating? Pain of not meditating is way worse than the pain of meditating. The pain of not having discipline is way worse than having discipline. And one of the things that I say to my kids, and they roll their eyes, but it's getting in there. Is like, discipline is delicious. I don't feel like I'm missing out when you guys are eating junk food, or well, they don't binge scroll because they don't have devices where they're allowed to, but I don't feel
How
like
old
I'm
are
missing.
they?
uh 15, 13, and 7.
Oh,
So
wow, even the 15-year-old doesn't
my
have.
15-year-old, he got a phone this year as a freshman. That was the first phone.
Wow.
Um, and so
He
and
must
so
be was he mad about that?
he was mad. I mean, but he also understands. He also gets
Yeah.
it, and he also sees how, you know, I don't even know. There's almost no chance that any of his people will listen to this, but he sees, frankly, how much more alive he is than his peers. So he also can't deny the proof that's in the pudding of like how zombied out
Mhm.
and desperate for craving and approval that most of his peers are, and how much more in his body and confident he is, not in a judgmental way, but just in a true discrimination way, like just like it is what it is. So yeah, he's been frustrated and he's welcome to share that frustration with me, and he doesn't think I've done everything right as a parent, and I certainly have not.
Mhm.
But overall, I think he sees the undeniable results. So, point being, discipline is delicious. It's way more that I think that people don't realize. They think they don't have time to do this stuff. They think they can't do this stuff. They think, "Oh, I'm already overwhelmed." Like, you can't not do this stuff, people.
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
life is hard enough. I look around and I wanna cry with mercy and say, "Oh my gosh, I don't know how." My life is challenging enough with all the things that I do to take care of myself, to regulate my nervous system, to eat well, to sleep well, and it's still overwhelming a lot of the time. I can't even imagine how hard it would be if I was, drinking beers and
Mhm.
taking gummies and eating junk food and staying up late and binge watching stuff. I mean, I do that stuff sometimes. Not the binge watching part, not the other things. I'm pretty adamant about what I put in my body, but like it's just too hard. The cultural trance, the pace of our life,
Yeah.
the pressures that we all feel, the traumas that we all carry. It's too hard to not do it.
Yeah.
And so choose which discomfort you want, the discomfort of doing it or the discomfort of not doing it. The discomfort of not doing it, in my opinion, is a million times worse. You're actually making it so much harder on yourself.
Yeah, I'm just gonna go with this thought that I'm having. Do you
Well,
imagine a world where it's not this hard? Do you think
I
it's
think it's,
possible to create like, a better world that isn't so challenging? Like, of course, there's always gonna be challenge,
yeah.
but sometimes it feels like there are structures in place that make it way more
Yeah.
challenging than it needs to be.
Right. But the systems themselves are in the
Yeah.
are both
Yeah.
are both the
Within.
are both perpetuating and expressing
Mhm.
their own cultural trans suffering. And
Yeah.
so I don't know.
Deconstructing those systems within.
Yeah. Decon- Deconstructing those systems means human beings waking up.
Exactly. Yeah.
It essentially means whatever you wanna call it, and I don't wanna maybe your audience and the people that are listening are all into spirituality, but there are certainly some people that are gonna unnecessarily dismiss it if we talk about it in those terms, but the fact of the matter is that some form of spiritual awakening is required from the individuals that are a part of these systems to dismantle them, and they won't be dismantled otherwise, and I don't know, I don't I'm not as optimistic. I'm all for our capacity to develop freedom and joy aside from the conditions, but I don't necessarily see things going in a better direction for the world at large. I don't know what type of
Ever.
well, maybe. Sure. So there's cycles and there's times and I don't there's I'm open to that possibility. I'm not waiting for it. I'm not waiting for it to
Yeah.
do what I can do to be alive and healthy and happy and free and contributing to
Yeah.
the greater good. I'm certainly not going to wait for the systems to change in order for me to try to impart these values on my children, on my friends, on my
Mhm.
community, on my family, and
Yeah.
saying, because I think that a lot of people are using the macro as an excuse to not take care of the micro. And so if you're waiting again for that to change, you're going to be waiting for it forever. And if there's any chance that it's going to change, it's by people choosing to wake up before it changes. Yeah. And there needs to be a critical mass of us, even though
Mhm.
consciousness is stronger than unconsciousness. There still needs to be a critical mass. There needs to be a tipping point. And I don't know. I don't know. I think in certain circles, I know that when I'm at like the Dr. Joe retreats and stuff, people are very into like, oh, it's a new world order coming. And, I also have other teachers that are pretty grounded, wise folks, probably the most brilliant and wise people that I know, a person in particular that I have direct contact with. And, he says a lot. Yeah. No spiritual master that he's ever known has ever said that things are going in the right direction for humanity. But that's kind of the hero's vow is that we say, "Okay, well, I'm in it anyway. I'm gonna do my
Mhm.
best anyway. I even if I'm fighting a losing battle, I'm gonna go down swinging. I'm gonna love anyway. I'm gonna open my heart anyway. I'm gonna be of service to others anyway." And aside from the fact that we seem to be in a time of confusion and suffering and gross individualism and
Mhm.
greed and that I'm going
Yeah.
to express my values and choices anyway.
Yeah. And that's actually really powerful,
Yeah.
and it
That's
creates a ripple effect.
and that's what they can't, by the way, and we're getting in a little, but yeah, in the relative world, there is a they, and they are actually doing harm. I
The
think
small
we, pro-
percent of people
I,
that benefit
yeah,
from the
yeah, and I
system.
think we all know who the they are in the modern theater that we're talking about.
Mhm.
But the fact of the matter is what they can't take for me is my choice to be happy
Yeah.
and free and to be a source of love and
Mhm.
value and contribution to myself, others in the world. That, you know, and it's almost cliche, but I'm going to do it anyway because in the coaching world, people love to bring up Viktor Frankl, but they bring up Viktor Frankl for good reason.
Mhm.
No meaning, the original title of the book that got translated as Man's Search for Meaning was actually saying yes to life in spite of anything.
Mm.
And gosh, if someone didn't earn the right to say that, I mean,
Yeah.
and so saying yes to life in spite of anything and becomes circles back to our point about choice. The thing that Viktor Frankl said kept him sane was his autonomy to choose in whatever circumstances, regardless, because he couldn't choose everything that he wanted to choose. He just needed to be choosing. So, for example, he said, if if a SS soldier was saying, look down, and if he didn't look down, he was going to be beaten, tortured,
Yeah.
killed.
Mhm.
He looked down and to the right. He did what he had to do in the circumstances to stay alive, but he still chose to look down and to the right instead of just looking down. And he did that, and he said that particular concept applied day in and day out in his life is what it was the difference between. He said the people, none of us had physical conditions to live. The people that died, obviously the ones that were killed, but the
Mhm.
people that just died without being killed he said their spirits died. And that's why, and then their bodies died. And he said the
Yeah.
difference between the people that stayed alive that weren't killed, they kept their spirit alive by exercising even the tiniest micro choices.
Mhm.
And so that's another thing that we can think about and we can feel empowered by. And the grace and ease question is like, even if I'm choosing just a little bit, we're blowing embers on the flame. And eventually,
Mhm.
it's
Yeah.
gonna it's gonna be warm.
Yeah. So bringing choice online is
Yeah.
probably the most important thread of all of this, right? Because it's, in a way,
Yeah.
it's seeding consciousness.
Choice might be the deciding or the differentiating factor for sentience or consciousness. Is choice is the essence of freedom. And ultimately, I think we're all in a game. And I don't use that term lightly to mean it's all happy, joy, joy, but we're all in a curriculum to discover freedom.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Not
freedom
every
is,
game is fun.
and freedom is the requisite for freedom is choice.
And you can tell me if you don't want to go here and we can cut it out. But what's coming up for me is like, do you think that there's a perspective outside of the one that we're having in which this game that we're playing is actually like really fun and
Oh,
maybe
yeah.
even, right?
Yeah.
How do you see that in terms of spirituality? Maybe if you want to get into that a little.
I think that I mean when I'm in the zone of what I'm attempting to practice in my life, it's fun. It's a lot of fun. And even when it's hard. And so I think that fun, I think that maybe there's even some researchers that differentiate between what I think they call it. I'm not an expert on this, so if I'm saying the wrong terms, forgive me. Type 1 fun and type 2 fun.
I've never heard about that.
Type 1 fun is basically, oh, go to a birthday party. And type 2 fun is like, I ran 3 miles and I loved it. you know. So there's like the fun that requires some effort and some grit and challenge. And really, and so if we look at, absolutely love the research on flow from the author whose name I definitely can't say. But the book
Chi
is
Haley?
Flow. Yeah, yeah. I don't. I believe gosh, I'm going to get myself in trouble here. I believe it's a Czechoslovakian name, but it's not a name that I can pronounce. But he is
It's FL.
the book is Flow. This is the original, you know, people talk about flow all the time now, but
Yeah.
this is the original person that coined the term and did the research on it. And the book is amazing, absolutely amazing. And he talks about the conditions for what puts people in flow. And essentially it's that there needs to be a challenge such enough that you have enough skill to accomplish it, but it doesn't feel easy. And you So you need to the balance between the challenge level and the skill level needs to be they need to be in a dynamic tension.
Yeah, that's what I was just
And
thinking
so
of.
that and so but we can put ourselves in this creative tension. And so most people have think about flow in terms of like, oh, when you're like skiing or riding a bike or dancing or making love or all these exalted moments. But and if you actually think about what is the one thing, this is a question that I like to ask people. What is the one thing that is common to everything that human beings enjoy?
Presence.
Exactly.
Mhm.
You're the only person who's ever answered it correctly. So, but
Really?
yeah, that's awesome. So, oh, it's like, but non-distracted presence.
Mhm.
And if you think about all those things that I just said, doing an athletic event, dancing, making love, meditating, breath work, the common factor in all of them is presence and flow. And so if we can cultivate the one thing that is common to everything that human beings enjoy, whether it's reading a good book or watching a good movie or being enraptured by the sunset or having a
Mhm.
delicious meal. Now, I take that one step further. Think about you are having that delicious meal made perfectly, perfect environment, perfect setting. Everything's just right. It's in your mouth. You're tasting it. You're, oh my gosh, it's so good. It's so succulent. The smells, the flavors, amazing. You get a text that someone you love was in a car accident. You don't know if they're going to die or live.
Mm.
Food is still in your mouth. How does it taste?
Like shit.
Some people will develop an allergy to that food that they won't ever be able to eat it
Yeah.
again. So my question is the taste in the food or is the taste in you?
Mhm. Yeah, I like that a lot.
And so we can cultivate the state of
Mhm.
being and we can put ourselves in a creative tension while we're doing the dishes. Because a
Mhm.
lot of people are doing the dishes with a prime, they're in a reactive identity of, oh my God, I have so much to do. I don't have time. I hate doing the dishes. This sucks. Right?
Mhm.
Boom. Well, guess what? Guess what they're going to do? They're going to hate doing the dishes. But if I'm oh, put myself into okay, I wonder how present I can. Questions are amazing. That already puts me in a challenge. I wonder how present I can be. I wonder how much I can smile while I do the
Mhm.
dishes. I wonder how fun this can be. I wonder how joyful I can be. I wonder if I can, do the dishes, I don't know. You could put time, you could do anything to toggle the factors to
Mhm.
create a challenge and skill dynamic that results in flow. And flow is what brings joy.
Mhm.
Not it is your state of consciousness that is joy brings joy, not the event, not the outer event. It is
Mhm.
your state of consciousness meeting the event.
Yeah.
And so that we can cultivate. That is in our power. Everything in life fits into two categories, stuff we can control and stuff we can't. And what we can control is the way we think, feel, act, how we perceive, our state of being, our consciousness.
Mhm.
Everything else
Mhm.
we can't. I can't
Right.
control how you're going to react to what I'm
Yeah.
saying right now. I can't control the weather. I can't control the government. And
Right.
most people spend most of their precious heartbeats and breaths focused on stuff they can't control.
Mhm.
And then they wonder why they feel so exhausted. They're wasting their
Yeah.
energy. But if you focus on what you can control, you get good return on investment. You focus on your body, on your breath, on your being, on your consciousness, on your love, on your joy. You get more energy back. You feel more
Mhm.
enlivened. You feel more embodied. And then you actually able to control more. You have more influence because you're healthier, you're happier.
Mhm.
So the irony is that most people are putting their most precious assets, their energy and their attention in buckets that are have a that are perpetually draining
Yeah.
instead of putting them into an investment account that keeps getting bigger.
Yeah, totally. And you mentioned that before about resistance,
Mhm.
which it seems like that's what it is. It's living in a
Yeah.
state of resistance.
Yeah. Resistance. Yep. And so,
Yeah.
yeah. So pain times. So then, yeah, maybe there's some discomfort. Oh my God. I feel like okay. I'm going to do the dishes anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And just
Yeah.
learning to be with that discomfort. I almost think about it like having a relationship with it.
Yeah.
Because when we're in relationship to something, we're receptive to it in some way,
Yeah.
which moves the resistance that we have towards it to the
Yeah.
side. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. For sure.
Yeah. Yeah. Is there anything else that you wanna share or feel like we didn't get to?
I don't know. I don't think so. I've just enjoyed kind of riffing off your questions. So if you have any more, I'm happy to go for it. And if it feels like a complete conversation for you, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was great. I really appreciate your perspective and sharing your wisdom. And how can people find you? if they're
Uh,
interested.
Thank you. That's a good question. Altogether dot academy is so it's not a regular dot com. So www dot altogether
I'll
A
link
L
it.
L you'll lick it. Okay. Altogether dot academy is my main website. And the stuff that I also have a YouTube channel, Michael Boyle System.
I'll link
So
that too.
the thing that I'm most kind of jazzed about right now is the coming together of the last 25 years of my life is what I'm calling the Michael Boyle coherence system. And it is we apply the ABCs: ancient wisdom, biological proof, and clinical acumen. And so I'm bringing these three things together in a unique way that I haven't ever done as fully before. I've always kind of been dabbling here and there, but together, they're all together in this system and bringing together like non-denominational secular spirituality with biological stuff like HRV and VO2 max
Cool.
and things like that, plus clinical stuff in terms of not therapy, for sure, not therapy, but what I really am excited about there is it called Eat Embodied Aliveness Trauma Transformation and learning how to metabolize that tension and stress and that difficulty and those difficult experiences and turn them into fuel for an even better life than we would have had if they didn't happen. And so that's what you'll see now on the altogether academy website is the Michael Boyle coherence system, and that's what I'm making content about most often on YouTube. And I'm also on LinkedIn. And I am by choice not on the other social media networks.
Gotcha. Are you offering that in like workshops? Is it individual
I
coaching or
haven't, yeah, right now, I'm doing it one on one with clients as in like coaching containers, and it's a 3 month process that I take people through. But I'm also open to, I love to talk. I love to do talks. I love to do workshops. I'm open to invitations. And as I kind of gain more space to do it, I've done it in the past. I love doing groups going through something like that. It takes some, if you've done that, I don't know if it takes some significant kind of marketing and setup stuff that I'm not really frankly into.
yeah, yeah,
If it so turns out that by me continuing to share what I love to share with joy builds an audience where that demand becomes relevant, then I'll do it. But I've been there and done that with like the trying to get people to do it, and I'm not going to do it anymore. So we'll see what happens.
well, thank you for sharing your information, and yeah, thanks for being here. I really appreciate
Thanks
it.
for inviting me. This is really fun.
Sure.